Commander Sarah Mitchell had always been good at following orders. At 32, she commanded the USS Resolute with the kind of steady confidence that made her crew trust her completely. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a regulation bun, her uniform pressed to perfection, and her decisions quick and decisive. What she didn't know was that her entire life was built on a lie. The morning started like any other aboard the naval destroyer. Sarah stood on the bridge, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. The ship cut through the calm waters with purpose, heading toward their next training exercise. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. "Captain." "Incoming transmission from Fleet Command," announced Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. Sarah nodded and walked over to receive the message. It was routine, confirmation of their training schedule and a reminder about the upcoming inspection. Nothing unusual, nothing to suggest that her world was about to turn upside down. She approved the response and returned to her position, unaware that this would be one of the last normal moments of her career. The joke started during lunch, in the officers' mess. Sarah sat with her senior staff, discussing the afternoon's training drills when Commander Phillips, her executive officer, made an offhand comment that would later prove to be more prophetic than anyone realized. "You know, Captain," Phillips said, cutting into his sandwich, "sometimes I think you run this ship like you're an admiral commanding a whole fleet." The other officers laughed, and Sarah smiled. "Well, someone has to keep you all in line," she replied, taking a sip of her coffee. "Besides, admirals have too many meetings and not enough sea time." "True that," agreed Lieutenant Commander Watson, the ship's navigation officer. "I heard Admiral Harrison spends more time in conference rooms than on deck." "That's exactly why I'm happy being a captain," Sarah said firmly. "Out here, we actually get to do the job we signed up for." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Phillips's comment stuck with her throughout the day. There was something oddly fitting about it, though she couldn't put her finger on why. She had always felt comfortable making decisions that seemed beyond her pay grade, and other captains often sought her advice on matters that weren't typically discussed among peers. That afternoon, during a routine navigation exercise, Sarah found herself in the Combat Information Center reviewing tactical displays. The exercise involved coordinating with 3 other ships in their task force, and as usual, the other captains seemed to defer to her judgment more than protocol would typically suggest. "Captain Martinez is requesting guidance on the northern approach," reported Petty Officer Chen from the radio station. Sarah studied the display, noting the positions of all vessels and the simulated threat patterns they were practicing against. Without hesitation, she began issuing coordinated orders that positioned all 4 ships for maximum effectiveness. It wasn't until after the exercise that she realized she had been giving orders to captains who outranked her in experience, if not in official rank. "Excellent coordination, Captain Mitchell," came the voice of Captain Torres over the radio. "Your tactical awareness never fails to impress." Sarah acknowledged the compliment, but it left her with an uneasy feeling. Why did everyone always seem to expect her to take charge? Why did admirals at fleet headquarters always seem to know her name when she attended briefings? Why did she have access to intelligence reports that other captains claimed they never saw? As evening approached, Sarah found herself walking the deck alone, a habit she had developed over the years. The crew she passed greeted her with unusual respect, even for a captain. They snapped to attention with a crispness that seemed excessive, and their eyes held a deference that went beyond the typical captain-crew relationship. She stopped by the ship's communications center to review the day's message traffic. Petty Officer Harrison, the senior communications specialist, was organizing files when she arrived. "Evening, Captain," Harrison said, jumping to his feet. "Is there anything specific you need?" "Just checking the routine traffic," Sarah replied. "Anything unusual today?" Harrison hesitated for a moment, glancing at his computer screen. Well, ma'am, there was one message that seemed different, classified way above our usual level. It was addressed to you personally, but when I tried to decrypt it, the system said I didn't have sufficient clearance. Sarah frowned. That's odd. What classification level? Admiral only access, ma'am. I've never seen that before on a destroyer. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Admiral only access? That made no sense. She was a commander, not even a full captain by Navy standards, despite what everyone called her. There had to be a mistake. Pull up my personnel file, she said quietly. Harrison's fingers flew over the keyboard, but after a moment he shook his head. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't have access to your complete file. Most of it seems to be classified above my level. This was getting stranger by the minute. Personnel files weren't typically classified, especially not for ship commanders. Sarah thanked Harrison and left the communications center, her mind racing with questions. Walking back to her quarters, she passed the ship's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Brooks, who was leaving his office with a stack of files. Working late tonight, Brooks? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Preparing the strategic assessment you requested for tomorrow's briefing with the task force commanders. Sarah paused. She didn't remember requesting any strategic assessment. Remind me what specific analysis you're preparing? Brooks looked surprised. The comprehensive threat evaluation for the Western Pacific region, ma'am. The one you said Admiral Reeves would be expecting when he joins us next week. Admiral Reeves. Sarah knew that name. He was one of the most senior admirals in the Pacific Fleet. Why would he be joining her ship? And why would he be expecting a strategic assessment from a destroyer commander? Of course, she said, not wanting to reveal her confusion. Carry on, Brooks. Back in her quarters, Sarah sat at her desk and tried to make sense of the day's events. She pulled out her personnel file, the copy she kept in her personal safe. Reading through it, everything seemed normal. Commander Sarah Mitchell, assigned to USS Resolute as commanding officer. But as she read more carefully, she noticed gaps. Periods of service that weren't fully explained, training courses listed without details, and most puzzling of all, a notation about special assignment protocols that she didn't remember. She opened her laptop and tried to access her complete Navy record through the personnel database. After entering her credentials, she was surprised to find herself blocked from viewing her own file. The system indicated that her record was restricted and required special authorization to access. This was unprecedented. Officers could always access their own personnel records. Something was very wrong. Sarah spent the next hour trying different approaches to access information about herself, but every avenue led to the same result. Access denied, classification level insufficient, authorization required. It was as if her own identity was classified. Unable to sleep, she made her way to the ship's library, hoping to find some regulation or manual that might explain what was happening. The library was small but well-stocked, and she found herself gravitating toward the section on Navy regulations and command structures. As she pulled a manual on command protocols from the shelf, a loose paper fell out. She picked it up and saw it was a copy of an old fleet organization chart. Her eyes scanned the document until she found her own name. There it was, Rear Admiral Sarah Mitchell, Commander Task Force 73, Admiral, not Commander, not Captain, Admiral. Sarah stared at the paper, her hands trembling slightly. This had to be a mistake, some kind of old document with an error. But as she looked more closely, she saw the date. It was only 6 months old. The implications began crashing over her like waves. If this document was accurate, she wasn't just a ship commander, she was a flag officer, responsible for multiple ships, thousands of personnel, and strategic operations across the Pacific. But how could that be possible? She had no memory of being promoted, no memory of the ceremonies and responsibilities that came with admiral rank. She thought back over the past months, searching for clues she might have missed. the deference of other captains, the intelligence briefings that seemed beyond her level, the way flag officers at headquarters treated her as an equal rather than a subordinate, the communications with classification levels she shouldn't have had access to. It all began to make a horrible kind of sense. Sarah sat in the empty library until dawn, the document in her hands, trying to understand how her entire identity could be wrong. Had there been some kind of accident, memory loss, or was this all an elaborate mistake that had somehow spiraled out of control? As the first light of morning filtered through the porthole, she heard the ship's wake-up call echo through the corridors. Soon, her crew would be expecting their captain to begin another normal day. But nothing would ever be normal again. Whatever the truth was, she had to find it. The joke about running the ship like an admiral suddenly wasn't funny anymore. Because if this document was real, she wasn't pretending to be an admiral. She actually was one, and somehow everyone knew it except her. The morning briefing felt different now that Sarah knew something fundamental was wrong with her identity. She sat at the head of the conference table, listening to her department heads report on the ship's status, but her mind was elsewhere. Every interaction, every salute, every "yes, ma'am" now carried new weight. Were they responding to a captain or an admiral? And why didn't she know which one she actually was? Commander Phillips finished his report on the ship's readiness status and looked at Sarah expectantly. "Captain, Admiral Reeves's aide called this morning. The Admiral will be arriving by helicopter at 1400 hours instead of next week. He requested a private meeting with you immediately upon arrival." Sarah's stomach tightened. Admiral Reeves was coming today, and he wanted to meet privately. This couldn't be a coincidence. Something was happening, something connected to her growing realization that her entire identity might be a lie. "Did he give any indication of the meeting's purpose?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Negative, ma'am. Just that it was urgent and classified." After dismissing the briefing, Sarah retreated to her quarters and locked the door. She pulled out the fleet organization chart she had found the night before and studied it again. Rear Admiral Sarah Mitchell, Commander Task Force 73. The more she looked at it, the more real it seemed. But if this was true, where were her admiral's insignia? Where were her flag officer quarters? Where was her staff? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly hiding the document. Lieutenant Commander Brooks entered, carrying a thick folder marked with multiple classification stamps. "Ma'am, the strategic assessment you requested. I also included the operational summaries from the other task force ships." Sarah accepted the folder, noting that Brooks's demeanor was different from usual, more formal, more deferential. "Thank you, Brooks. Tell me, how long have I been requesting these types of strategic assessments?" Brooks looked puzzled by the question. "Since you took command of the task force, ma'am, about 18 months ago." Task force command, 18 months ago. Sarah's memory of that time period was strangely fuzzy, filled with what she had always assumed were routine training exercises and normal ship operations. But if Brooks was right, she had been commanding multiple ships for over a year without realizing it. "Brooks, refresh my memory. Which ships are currently under my command?" Now Brooks looked genuinely concerned. "Ma'am, are you feeling all right? USS Resolute, USS Montgomery, USS Jackson, and USS Porter. The same 4 ships you've been coordinating for the past year and a half." 4 ships. She had been giving orders to 4 ships, thinking she was just participating in training exercises. The tactical decisions she made, the coordination she provided, it hadn't been suggestions or recommendations. They had been orders from a flag officer to subordinate commanders. After Brooks left, Sarah opened the assessment folder. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Intelligence reports marked "For Admiral Mitchell only." Operational plans spanning months, strategic recommendations for Pacific Fleet operations, personnel evaluations for ship commanders under her authority, and at the bottom of the pile, a psychological evaluation report with her name on it. With trembling hands, she opened the psychological evaluation. The words swam before her eyes as she read, "Subject continues to demonstrate complete integration of fabricated identity. Memory suppression protocols remain effective. Subject functions normally as ship commander while retaining strategic thinking capabilities necessary for flag officer duties. Recommend continuing current protocol until mission completion." Fabricated identity. Memory suppression protocols. Mission completion. Sarah dropped the report as if it had caught fire. This wasn't a bureaucratic mistake or a case of mistaken identity. This was intentional. Someone had deliberately hidden her real identity from her, suppressed her memories, and created an elaborate fiction that she was just a ship commander when she was actually an admiral. But why? What kind of mission required an admiral to forget she was an admiral? The answers came flooding back in fragments as her suppressed memories began to surface. She remembered now bits and pieces of her real life. A briefing room in the Pentagon, Admiral Harrison explaining a top-secret operation, enemy infiltration of high-level Navy communications, the need for a flag officer who could operate without anyone knowing her true identity, even herself. "Deep cover," she whispered to herself, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She had volunteered for deep cover, agreeing to have her memories suppressed so she could command a task force while appearing to be just another ship captain. But something had gone wrong with the mission timeline. She was supposed to have been restored to full awareness months ago. More memories returned. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, the Navy psychiatrist who had overseen her memory suppression, the careful psychological conditioning that had made her believe she was Commander Mitchell instead of Rear Admiral Mitchell. The implanted memories of a different career path, different assignments, different relationships. She remembered her real quarters now, not the captain's cabin she occupied, but a flag officer's suite on another ship entirely. Her real staff, her real responsibilities. The strategic decisions she had been making unconsciously, guided by suppressed knowledge and instincts she didn't understand. The mission. She was investigating a spy ring that had infiltrated the Pacific Fleet's command structure. Someone with access to flag officer communications was passing sensitive information to foreign intelligence. The only way to identify the mole was to operate from within the system, while appearing to be outside it. An admiral who didn't know she was an admiral couldn't be suspected of accessing admiral-level intelligence. But the investigation was supposed to have lasted only 6 months. Something had gone wrong. Either the mission had been extended without her knowledge, or something had happened to the people who were supposed to restore her memories. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for her secure communication device. She needed to contact Dr. Kane, needed to understand what had happened and why she was still living this lie. But when she tried to place the call, the system told her she didn't have authorization to reach that number. Of course, Commander Mitchell wouldn't have access to contact the psychiatric division that handled classified memory operations. Only Admiral Mitchell would have that clearance. She was trapped in her own cover identity. The implications were staggering. For over a year, she had been successfully commanding a task force while believing she was just following orders from higher authority. Every strategic decision she made, she had attributed to training and instinct, not knowing she was drawing on the knowledge and experience of a flag officer. Her crew, her fellow commanders, everyone around her knew her real rank except her. A new thought struck her with horrifying clarity. If her memories had been suppressed for longer than planned, what else might have changed? Was the mission still active? Was she still investigating the spy ring? Or had that threat been resolved? And most importantly, who else knew about her condition? The spy she was hunting could be anyone. Another ship commander, a member of her own staff, even someone in the Pentagon who had access to her psychological files. If they discovered that her memory suppression was breaking down, they might take action to protect themselves. Sarah realized she was in incredible danger. She knew too much and too little at the same time. Her returning memories made her a threat to whoever had extended her mission beyond its planned duration, but her incomplete recollection left her vulnerable and confused. She needed allies, but who could she trust? Commander Phillips had been her executive officer for the entire 18 months. Did he know her real identity? Lieutenant Commander Brooks had been providing her with Admiral-level intelligence reports. He had to know something. But any of them could be the spy she was originally investigating. The sound of a helicopter approaching snapped her back to the present. Admiral Reeves was arriving, and she still had no idea whether he was friend or enemy. Was he coming to restore her memories and complete the mission? Or was he coming to ensure her silence permanently? Sarah looked at herself in the mirror, seeing her uniform with new eyes. The insignia showed commander's stripes, but now she could see the subtle differences. The fabric was flag officer quality, the cut slightly different from standard issue. Even her uniform had been carefully crafted to maintain her cover while providing small acknowledgments of her true rank. A knock at her door made her jump. "Ma'am, Admiral Reeves's helicopter is on final approach," came Phillips's voice. "Thank you, Commander. I'll meet him on the flight deck." As Sarah prepared to leave her quarters, she made a decision. She wouldn't reveal what she had discovered, not until she understood the full situation. If Admiral Reeves was here to help her, he would know the right words to say, the right codes to use. If he was here for other reasons, her ignorance might be the only thing keeping her alive. She tucked the psychological evaluation report inside her jacket and headed for the flight deck, knowing that the next hour would either restore her true identity or potentially end her life. The joke about commanding like an admiral wasn't funny anymore because the truth was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Walking through the ship's corridors, Sarah saw her crew with new understanding. Their respect, their trust, their willingness to follow her orders. It was all based on something she hadn't even known about herself. She was living a lie so complete that she had been lying to herself. As she climbed the stairs to the flight deck, one more memory surfaced. The real reason she had volunteered for this mission. It wasn't just about catching a spy. Someone she cared about had been killed because of the intelligence leak. Her mentor, Admiral Thompson, who had died when his ship was ambushed using information that should have been secure. The mission was personal, and now, standing on the deck waiting for Admiral Reeves's helicopter, Sarah Mitchell, whichever version of her was real, was about to discover whether her sacrifice had been worth it or whether she had become just another casualty of a war she couldn't remember fighting. The helicopter touched down on the USS Resolute's flight deck with military precision, its rotors gradually slowing as Admiral Reeves emerged. Sarah watched from the superstructure as the tall, gray-haired officer stepped onto her ship, accompanied by two aides and what appeared to be a medical officer. The sight of the medical personnel made her stomach clench with anxiety. Admiral Reeves spotted her immediately and approached with a measured gait that suggested both urgency and caution. As he drew closer, Sarah could see the concern etched in his weathered features. This was not the face of a man making a routine visit. "Admiral Mitchell," he said quietly as he reached her, and the words hit her like a physical blow. Not captain, not commander, but Admiral. Coming from him, there was no question about her true rank. "Sir," she replied carefully, unsure of what protocol to follow when you're an admiral who has been pretending to be a captain. "We need to talk privately, immediately." His tone left no room for discussion. Sarah led him to her ready room, the same space where she had been living as a commander for 18 months, not knowing it had been temporarily converted from flag officer quarters. Admiral Reeves closed the door behind them, and activated a small electronic device that she recognized as a signal jammer. "Your memories are returning," he said without preamble. It wasn't a question. "Some of them. Admiral, what happened? The mission was supposed to last 6 months. It's been over a year and a half." Reeves's expression grew grim. The situation became more complex than we anticipated. The spy ring was larger than we thought, and we needed more time to identify all the participants. But 3 days ago, something changed. He pulled out a tablet and showed her a classified intelligence report. Dr. Kane was found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide, but our investigation suggests otherwise. Someone discovered what she was doing and eliminated her. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Dr. Kane had been her only link to recovering her true memories, the only person who could safely reverse the psychological conditioning that had kept her in character for so long. "Without Dr. Kane's protocols, we've been forced to let your memories return naturally," Reeves continued. "It's dangerous. Both the incomplete restoration and the fact that someone now knows about the operation." "Do we know who killed her?" "We have suspicions, but no proof. That's why I'm here. The investigation has reached a critical point, and we need your help to finish it." Sarah pulled the psychological evaluation from her jacket and handed it to Reeves. "I found this in my intelligence files. How much of my life has been a lie?" Reeves studied the document, his frown deepening. "This evaluation is dated 3 months ago. That's impossible. Dr. Kane stopped generating reports on your condition 8 months ago when the mission was supposed to end." A chill ran through Sarah as the implications became clear. "Someone else has been monitoring my psychological state. Someone with access to Dr. Kane's protocols. Which means," Reeves said slowly, "our spy has been watching you all along, possibly even manipulating your memory recovery." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The mission had been compromised from within. Someone with high-level access had not only been feeding information to enemy agents, but had also been using Sarah's unique situation for their own purposes. An admiral with suppressed memories was the perfect unwitting asset. She could access sensitive information and make strategic decisions while being unable to remember or report what she was really doing. "Admiral," Sarah said carefully, "I need to know something. In the past 18 months, what strategic decisions have I made that I attributed to training exercises?" Reeves consulted his tablet, scrolling through operational records. "You've directed fleet movements across the Pacific, coordinated responses to 3 separate security threats, and provided strategic assessments that influenced Pacific Fleet policy, all while believing you were participating in routine training." Sarah's mind reeled. She had been unconsciously operating as a flag officer for over a year, making real decisions with real consequences, while someone else had been using her compartmentalized knowledge for their own agenda. "There's more," Reeves continued grimly. "We've been analyzing your command decisions during the suppressed period. Some of them don't match your usual tactical style. It's as if someone else's strategic thinking was being channeled through you." The horrifying truth was becoming clear. Not only had her memories been suppressed, but someone had been subtly influencing her decision-making process. The spy hadn't just been stealing information, they had been using a compromised admiral as their unwitting agent. "Who has had access to my psychological files?" Sarah asked. "Dr. Kane, myself, Admiral Harrison from Fleet Intelligence, and the Psychiatric Oversight Board." "That's only 5 people who should have known about your condition." "What about my staff? My executive officer has been providing me with intelligence reports for months. Commander Phillips was briefed on your cover identity but not your true mission. He believes you're a captain with unusually good strategic instincts, same with most of your crew." Sarah thought about Phillips' comment the day before about commanding like an admiral. Had it really been an innocent observation, or had he known more than he was letting on? A soft knock interrupted their conversation. "Come in," Reeves called. Commander Phillips entered, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness. "Admirals, I apologize for interrupting, but we have a situation. Our communications array just received an unauthorized transmission. Someone tried to access classified files remotely." Sarah and Reeves exchanged glances. "What files?" Sarah asked. "Personnel records, ma'am, specifically psychological evaluation reports." The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone was making a move, possibly triggered by Admiral Reeves's arrival. "Commander Phillips," Reeves said carefully, "how long have you known that Captain Mitchell is actually Admiral Mitchell?" Phillips' face went pale. "Sir, I'm not sure what you mean." "The man just referred to both of us as admirals," Sarah pointed out quietly. "That's not something someone would do by accident." Phillips stood silent for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged in defeat. 6 months, sir. I figured it out about 6 months ago when I noticed discrepancies in the command structure and started investigating." "And what did you do with that information?" Reeves's voice was dangerously calm. I reported it to Admiral Harrison. He told me it was classified and I was to continue treating Captain Mitchell as my commanding officer, but to be aware of her true status in case of emergencies." Sarah felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Harrison was one of the 5 people who knew about her condition. If he had been briefing Phillips, it meant either the security around her mission had been deliberately compromised, or Harrison himself was the spy. "Commander Phillips," she said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil, "did Admiral Harrison give you any specific instructions about monitoring my activities or reporting on my behavior?" Phillips looked miserable. "He asked me to send him weekly reports on your command decisions and any unusual behavior. He said it was for your protection, to make sure the treatment wasn't affecting your judgment." Treatment, not mission. Harrison had been characterizing her memory suppression as medical treatment rather than operational security. That was a significant distinction that suggested he was either lying to Phillips or fundamentally misunderstood the nature of her situation. "Did you send him a report this week?" Reeves asked. "Yesterday, sir. After the comment about commanding like an admiral, and after Admiral Mitchell seemed confused about some of her previous orders." Sarah's heart sank. If Harrison was the spy, then he now knew her memories were returning. If he wasn't, then her situation had just been reported to someone who might be. Reeves activated his communicator. "This is Admiral Reeves to Fleet Security. I need an immediate investigation of all communications between Admiral Harrison and any external parties in the last 72 hours. Priority Alpha." While they waited for the security team to respond, Sarah found herself studying Phillips with new eyes. He had been watching her for months, reporting on her every decision, all while maintaining the pretense of being her loyal executive officer. Even if his motives were innocent, the betrayal stung. "Commander," she said finally, "I need you to think carefully about your interactions with Admiral Harrison. Did he ever ask you about specific operational details, intelligence reports, personnel decisions?" Phillips nodded slowly. "He was particularly interested in your strategic assessments and your access to classified communications. He asked several times about whether you seemed to have knowledge beyond what a destroyer captain should possess." That settled it. Harrison hadn't been monitoring her condition for medical reasons. He had been tracking her capabilities, possibly to determine how much classified information she could access while her memories were suppressed. Reeves' communicator crackled to life. "Admiral, we've found something. Admiral Harrison sent an encrypted message to an unknown recipient 40 minutes ago. Right after Commander Phillips's report came in, the message contained a single phrase: package compromised. Execute contingency 7. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Package compromised. That was clearly referring to Sarah. Execute Contingency 7 could mean anything, but none of the possibilities were good. "Admiral," Phillips said urgently, "there's something else. Admiral Harrison specifically asked me to ensure that Admiral Mitchell would be available for a private meeting today. He said Admiral Reeves would explain everything when he arrived." Sarah and Reeves stared at each other in growing horror. Harrison had known about Reeves's visit in advance. He had positioned Phillips to monitor the meeting, and now he had activated some kind of contingency plan that involved a compromised package. "We need to get off this ship," Reeves said grimly. "Now." But even as he spoke, the ship's general alarm began blaring. Over the intercom came an announcement that chilled Sarah's blood. "All hands. This is the bridge. We have received orders to implement communication lockdown. No personnel are authorized to leave the ship until further notice." They were trapped. Admiral Harrison's contingency plan was already in motion, and they were caught in the middle of it. Sarah looked out the porthole and saw the other ships in her task force moving into positions that would prevent any escape from the USS Resolute. "Admiral," she said quietly to Reeves, "I think the joke just became deadly serious." The truth was finally clear. What had started as an elaborate undercover operation to catch a spy had become a trap designed to eliminate the people who had discovered the truth. Sarah's suppressed memories had been both her protection and her doom. They had kept her alive by making her useful, but now that they were returning, she had become a liability that needed to be eliminated. Standing in her ready room, surrounded by the evidence of 18 months of unknowing deception, Rear Admiral Sarah Mitchell finally understood the full scope of what she was facing. The spy ring hadn't just been stealing information. They had been orchestrating a complete infiltration of Pacific Fleet operations, using her as an unwitting asset while planning her eventual elimination. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had restored her memories just enough for her to understand the danger, but not enough to make her helpless. She was still an admiral, still in command of 4 ships, and still capable of fighting back. The joke about commanding like an admiral was over. Now it was time to prove she really was one.